Let me start with a question that should stop every driver in their tracks. If you were to get in a crash tomorrow and your airbag deployed, would it protect you or could it actually kill you? That's not a hypothetical. That's not fear-based speculation. That is exactly what the federal government is warning consumers about right now. Welcome to the Airing of Grievances, the show where we slow things down, cut through the industry noise, and talk honestly about what's really happening in the collision repair world, especially when it impacts your safety. My name is Eric. Normally, I'm joined here by Rob, but you'll notice that he's not with me again this week. And that's for a very good reason. Rob recently became a brand new grandpa for the very first time, and he's currently out in the Carolinas supporting his daughter and son-in-law, and of course, meeting his brand new grandson. So we're thrilled for him, and we'll happily hold things down while he's doing what really matters. Now, today's topic. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, has issued an urgent warning about dangerous, likely illegally imported airbag inflators, primarily coming from China, that are being installed into vehicles here in the United States after collisions. And when I say dangerous, I don't mean they might not work perfectly. I mean that these airbags have already killed people, not because the crash was unsurvivable, but because the airbag itself violently ruptured, sending metal shrapnel into the driver. That should never happen, and yet it has. So today, we're going to talk about what's actually going on, why this problem keeps resurfacing, how long has the U.S. known about the counterfeit airbags, and most importantly, what you can do to protect yourself and your family. Let's start with the basics. When you're in a serious collision, your airbag deploys because a device called an inflator rapidly generates gas to fill the bag. That inflator is not a generic component. It is a precision-engineered safety device that must meet strict federal standards. When it's designed and manufactured correctly, it inflates the airbag smoothly and predictably. When it isn't, it can explode. In the cases that triggered this latest federal warning, the inflators ruptured violently, sending large metal fragments into the cabin of the vehicle. Drivers suffered catastrophic injuries to the chest, neck, and head. In multiple cases, the crash itself was survivable. The airbag wasn't. And here's the part that should concern every used car buyer in America. These inflators were not legal for sale in the United States. They were likely imported illegally, and they were installed after crashes, primarily in vehicles that had already been damaged and repaired. In other words, these weren't factory defects in brand new cars. These were post-collision repairs. Now, let's talk about who this affects the most, because this is not evenly distributed risk. The highest risk vehicles share some common traits. They often have a salvage or rebuilt title, a history of prior airbag deployment, repairs done under extreme cost pressure, or incomplete documentation about which parts were installed. The federal warning specifically calls out certain models, including Chevrolet Malibus and Hyundai Sonatas, but I want to be very clear here. This is not limited to those vehicles. Those are simply the vehicles where investigators have already identified confirmed incidents. If a vehicle has ever been in a crash where airbags deployed, especially if it was repaired outside of a manufacturer-certified repair network, it deserves scrutiny. Now let's address a question that I think every reasonable person would ask. How long has the U.S. known about counterfeit or substandard airbags? Because when people hear urgent warning, they often assume that this is a brand new problem. It isn't. The truth is, the federal government has been warning about counterfeit airbags for well over a decade. As far back as 2012, the NHTSA publicly warned consumers and repair professionals about fake and substandard replacement airbags entering the U.S. market. Those early warnings were triggered after testing showed that many of the counterfeit airbags failed to deploy at all, deployed inconsistently, or deployed with dangerous levels of force. Now, here's an important clarification, and this matters. It is not true that injuries or deaths only started happening recently. What is true is that for many years, those incidents were difficult to exclusively link to counterfeit inflators. Why? Well, because after a crash, investigations often stop once the cause of death has been determined. Airbag components are not always forensically examined, and counterfeit parts can look convincing unless you know exactly what to look for. In many cases, deaths were attributed to trauma from the collision, when in reality, the airbag itself may have caused or worsened the injury. What changed in the last few years, especially from 2023 forward, is that investigators began identifying patterns. Multiple incidents, similar injuries, the same types of inflators, the same unauthorized manufacturers. By 2024 and now into 2026, the evidence became undeniable. This is not a one-off defect. This is a systematic safety failure tied to illegal replacement parts. So that raises the next obvious question. If we've known about this problem for so long, why are we still dealing with it? The answer is uncomfortable, but it's important. First, post-collision repairs often happen out of the sight of the consumer. Once your vehicle is damaged and taken to a shop, most people assume if it looks right, it must be right. But airbags are hidden. Inflators are hidden. And unless someone is specifically checking part origin and certification, you'd never know. Second, salvage and rebuilt vehicles are a major vulnerability point. These vehicles often change hands multiple times, they can cross state lines, and they're repaired with the primary goal of minimizing cost. Sound familiar? That creates the opportunity for unsafe shortcuts. And third, there is no routine federal inspection of replacement airbag components after a crash. Once a vehicle leaves the repair facility, there is no automatic verification that OEM-approved inflators were used, or federal safety standards were met, or that illegal parts were not installed. And finally, and this is the hardest truth to say out loud, there is a financial incentive for bad actors. Unsafe parts are cheaper. They increase margins, and unless someone is seriously injured or killed, they often go unnoticed. Now, if you're thinking, well, I'm not a car expert, what am I supposed to do about this? That's exactly why we're talking about it. Because this is not a technical problem. This is a consumer awareness problem. If you buy a used vehicle, especially one that was in a prior crash, you're trusting that the most critical safety systems in that car were repaired correctly. And the reality is, sometimes they aren't. So let's talk about what you can do starting today. First, check the vehicle's history. Before you buy a used car, and even if you own one, run a vehicle history report. Look for prior collision damage, airbag deployment, salvage or rebuilt title branding. If airbags were deployed in the past, that's not an automatic deal breaker, but it is a reason to ask more questions. Second, ask specifically about airbag repairs. If your vehicle has ever been repaired after a crash, ask, were OEM airbag components used? Were the inflators sourced through the manufacturer? Is there documentation? And listen, if the answer is vague or dismissive or defensive, it's a huge red flag. Third, have the system inspected if you're unsure. A trusted repair facility or dealership can inspect airbag systems and verify part authenticity. And if something looks suspicious, don't ignore it. Fourth, be cautious with salvage and rebuilt vehicles. These vehicles are not inherently unsafe, but they do carry a higher risk and demand higher scrutiny. And finally, report your concerns. If you suspect a counterfeit or illegal airbag component has been installed, do not drive the vehicle and report it to the NHTSA or the appropriate authorities. Your report could prevent the next tragedy. Here's the bigger takeaway that I want you to remember. Airbags are one of the most important safety innovations in automotive history. They save lives when they're real. But a fake airbag is worse than no airbag at all. And the fact that these components are still entering the United States market tells us something important. Safety cannot be assumed. It has to be verified. This isn't about fear. It's about informed decisions. It's about asking better questions, demanding transparency, and refusing to compromise when it comes to safety. If this video made you think differently, please share it, especially with someone shopping for a new car, someone driving a rebuilt vehicle, or someone who's recently been in a collision, because awareness is what stops this from ever happening again. Thanks so much for spending time with me. Please stay safe, ask questions, and we'll see you the next time on the Airing of Grievances. My name is Eric Raymer. Happy Saturday.